Hey folks, welcome to a new episode of Long Shots. Hey Sharat, how's it going, man?
It's going very well, and the podcasting recent sort of guests have been very exciting, and we have another one today, and doing some kind of work and plugged into a full service top in terms of what they do. So I'm very interested to hear more.
Absolutely. So we have Jitesh Agarwal, founder of Treelife Consulting, tuned in all the way from Mumbai. I understand. Jitesh, how's it going?
It's going on good. It's getting hot here, so I mean, we're just getting used to it.
Yeah.
So Jitesh, obviously you kind of started your journey from Deloitte. You were there for close to 6 years. Then you kind of close to 5 years, I think. Then you went into and kicked off Tree Life with Garima. Now, Tree Life, as I understand, is a startup slash SME slash businesses looking to enter India focused consulting operation. You guys look at accounting, tax, and compliance, as well as legal support, and I'm sure a lot of other things.
Correct.
So, it's a pleasure to have you with us. And obviously, I mean, first I'll just start from a very basic question. Like last 7-8 months have been pretty much unprecedented in the life of any organization, leave alone startups or SMEs. How has business been? How are things going on?
So I think it's a very interesting phase for businesses, right? So I think initially there was this whole scare about what's going to happen next, right? But at the same time, this whole Indian mentality of jugaad sort of like kicked in, right? Where we saw so many businesses, right, evolving. Just their business models trying something new, and especially in the SME space, right, which had become very redundant in overall having very process driven thing, right? So they were forced to think, bring in new products, try new models and stuff. So obviously, at overall scheme of things, economy slowed down, things have slowed down, but I think it sort of help people. It's become a new light for everyone that we are all on the same scale. Let's try new things. Let's look at it with a more positive insight in terms of, is there something more we can do with the current setup? We can try, right? So I think there's this big enterprising or positive vibe also, which is parallelly running around with the virus. People want to just explore. So I think that's a very intriguing part about businesses. And I think the other part to it is where it's sort of more from a profit driven approach right now to a very sustainable business approach. Mm-hmm. So people ask us right now, especially in the startup ecosystem, that have you seen revenues growing, right? And to pre-COVID levels. So we say no, we've not seen that, but we've definitely seen very high increased profitability, right?
Yeah.
Because what's happened is that people have cut costs drastically. So they've realized that they could operate at 40 to 50% of the expense what they were doing pre-COVID, right? So that though the revenue levels have gone 70, 80, but the costs have become 40, 50. So there's a big enhancement of profit. So I think from that perspective, we are seeing a great amount of involvement about what's happening, and I think obviously the next 6 months will really shape it up. But I'm fairly positive about how things will shape up and come out in the next 6 months.
It's very interesting you said that, because I think that entire observation of a hit on the top line but some sort of margin expansion, that is not limited to startups. That's, I think, kind of more widespread within the overall business ecosystem as well, right?
Absolutely. I mean, I was just giving an example, but it's been across the segment, especially in IT and all these spaces, where you start realizing. I mean, it's a little less on the manufacturing side because you really need that labor to be there and stuff like that. But especially where there's services related economy, IT and stuff like that, everyone sort of like going complete cut down cost till March and next June, where they're saying that anyways we don't need you as of now, so why don't you just sit home? We'll give you additional compensation and stuff like that, but just be safe and work from home. So there's definitely been a great margin enhancement in all these businesses where service is the prime factor.
Yeah, and typically whenever people talk about growth, your mind typically goes to top line growth, but bottom line growth is probably just as important, if not more, right? From the kind of work you guys do, how does that fit into this narrative? Does that mean your work sort of heightens in terms of more specialization towards cost cutting measures? Like if people with internal legal teams or internal corp dev teams will increasingly look outwards towards operators like you, or do you think for you guys it's more or less the same? I mean, how does that change your dynamic at Tree Life?
So I think this came from where when I was in Deloitte, right, and I looked at a lot of SMEs and stuff back then, right, and I always felt that they were struggling to essentially get hands-on quality services, right, where they had the capital aptitude or the cash flow to really burn cost, right, but they were very intimidated by going to bigger firms. They just wanted something which is more leveled up for them to be able to approach. And that sort of was one of the key reasons when we started this. Right? So today, that's what we use to our advantage. Where over the last 6 years, where we sort of identified that domain expertise, say startups and SMEs, right? That even if today, say a big company comes and tells me that, hey, why don't you work for us? My answer is typically no, right? Because I don't really understand the dynamics of a bigger organization. I understand how the dynamics of a startup and SME happens, right? So how this, over a period, that knowledge set has evolved, right? So if today a SME sort of comes to us, right, we pretty much know about 70 to 80% of the problem because they remain sort of constant across the ecosystem, right? Across all startups and SMEs. It's only 20% problems which are customized. So when you actually look at their cost cutting solutions or managing their treasuries and stuff like that, if you go across them, they're just unaware of these concepts. So when you just sort of enlighten them that these are what other SMEs are also doing and could sort of help you save margins or make some extra bucks on the float which you're sitting on, they're more than happy to sort of understand it. So when it comes from a bigger fish, they just feel a little more intimidated, but when you feel you're leveled up, they just want to listen to you. So I think what works for us is, again, that we work more first in the capacity of an advisor, and then we sort of obviously go into like a more technical background where if it requires some regulatory parts or some finance part and stuff. But the idea always, the approach is business first, and then those things sort of come. So that gives us the edge in terms of understanding these things.
So for you mentioned for SMEs, the 80% of the problems are ones you see all throughout the ecosystem. I mean, what are those problems? Are they like balance sheet optimization, working capital? You keep on. We kind of, because we also have some amount of exposure to an advisory business. Like we often meet repeated set of promoters who have some excess cash. They don't know what to do with it, or they don't have the bandwidth to know what they have to do with it. So there must be some common threads, like you yourself pointed out within SMEs, that you see. Absolutely. One organization after another. What are those?
Okay, so I think to start with, right, SMEs are generally more manufacturing based. So one common trouble you'll always see is inventory with them. They have no damn idea about what's the inventory sitting in their books, So everyone, they have a number in their head, whereas when they open the books, it's another number. So there's always this, gap of information, right? So I think the biggest problem where one of Indians don't like, and especially in the SME space, is data versus information. So there's a lot of data which is there across the organization, but because it's so fragmented, right, it's never made into a symmetric information that can be used for any business drivers, right? Yeah. So, the first problem you identify is that they're able to establish a chain of data to information, like, being able to create an MIS or something like that, right? It sort of helps them think that, okay, I'm sitting on this inventory for too long. Can I, get done with it at a scrap value, right? Or, am I making enough margins, right? So all these numbers for them are sort of going on in their head, whereas when they actually add up the numbers what are on the sheets, it never actually match up. SMEs, again, especially in the Indian ecosystem, right? These are all promoter-driven organizations, right? So there is that problem where they want to make it a managerial setup, a management and owner promoter set different, but they're so used to essentially controlling the business at large, they're not able to professional management really kick into the business, right? But when you're trying to really scale and get out of that capacity, you need to let management sort of take over,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So I think this is another space where we feel a lot of SMEs can when they can let a more professional environment in the organization and sort of plug them out and be like a more promoter, just act as promoters of the organization. So this is another common trouble which we see, and because of this, what happens is it's a very people over processed kind of an organization. But I feel the minute you sort of go into the SME leg or the bigger entity leg, and you want to further grow from there, it's a process over people organization which can help you grow, because otherwise there's always that level of dependency on the promoter to take the decisions. So I think these are a couple of very key attributes which we see in terms of how an SME can grow and stuff like that.
Jitesh, it seems like, at Treelife, you guys wear like a strategy consulting kind of a hat as well, right? It's not just about sort of getting drafting work for a legal document, or there is that level of value add that you're increasingly adding. Is that a fair characterization for you guys as a firm?
Absolutely. I think our start point, right? That I don't want to get into a transaction business. I want to get into a relationship business, right? So, a transaction is where, you have like a bigger player who has a very off the shelf product that, okay, you want to incorporate a company, you pay me 10,000 rupees and I'm done, right? Our idea is to sort of grow with the company, right? So we want to spend that initial time to understand that, what your business is about, what you're trying to do and stuff, and is there some value add we can do, right? Only if we feel that there's a value add, you add to us, we add to you, right, is where we want to take it, because the idea is not to create 3,000 relationships, but the idea is to have probably 300 relationships, but such ingrained relationships that they can sort of take you a long way. So that's our thought process today. I don't know what you think about it 5 years from now, but today, I mean, in very prudent, we're in a relationship business. So strategy is a very, very big key element, that can we add value to you and can you add value to us?
No, that makes sense. And are generally SMEs and promoters sort of open to the idea of change, or acting on some of the recommendations, or do you see a lot of inertia in the marketplace?
So I think they're very, very driven with the fact that they want to bring that change, right? So I don't think that's an apprehension for them, and they're even okay to spend that money. They bring the change, right? But any change it's not one person changing, but in an SME, it's a plethora of people who need to allow change along, and change sort of like has to happen right from the bottom to the top, right? So this is where what happens is that the biggest challenge there is the human mindset is the biggest hurdle to the change, right? So though the promoter wants to change because he sees that if he's able to bring, say, for example, bring a system into the organization, right? There are so many people who have to be on the system, but everyone's so opposed because they're so used to it. So that sort of brings a big problem into it overall. So at a promoter level, they really want to do it, but then because of the mindset, the change the people, the mindset, the change the people need to bring in their mindset always become that hurdle. And second is in SMEs always it's a firefighting situation most times, right? So I don't blame these promoters that though they want to bring about the change, but sometimes the firefighting situation comes and they have to move their resources to that. They can't be like an HUL where you have that commanding capacity that I've said no, you have to wait for it. So this becomes the challenge. So I think there's a great amount of willingness. The challenge comes in the execution.
You mentioned that you don't want to be in the transactional business, but you want to be in a relationship business. There is a kind of commercial side to it that you need to square with it also, right? Effectively, the reason why a lot of people enter the transactional business is that someone is paying someone else, and you kind of are able to, get some sort of a cut if you're executing that particular deal. But when it comes to relationship oriented or a strategy advisory type of work, then it's usually longer dated. It's more, where you go deep in bed with the management. There's a fair amount of management bandwidth that also goes into it. And, there's a good chance there'll be some sort of a long-term retainer type of model that comes with it. Effectively, like one also has to pay one's bills, right? One can't just do this otherwise. And that's where SMEs probably are, that's where larger companies have a very different outlook when it comes to strategy work versus SMEs. Do you see that, or do you see things are changing, and do you see that there is this greater urge within small and medium businesses also to professionalize, to actually put more processes in place, and they have an appetite to pay also for such kind of service?
Oh, absolutely. I think they're more than happy to sort of bring this change, right? So they are also they're reading newspapers and news, and they're seeing especially the younger organizations grow and stuff like that. And that's why everyone wants to say adapt technology, see if they can go global and stuff like that, probably raising some capital and stuff like that. So I think people are very willing, Indian entrepreneurs, and I would believe that Indian entrepreneurs are in generally very enterprising. It's just that they've probably been in that comfort zone or not got access to the capital or the resources, because of which they've sort of stuck to their main guns, right? But given a choice, I would say at least 40% of the entrepreneurs, in the SME or the startup space, would want to really scale up and do bigger things than be stuck to what they're doing currently, right? And just to sort of go back to what you said about transactional versus relationship. So idea is to even do transactions, right? So we do transactions where we help companies raise money, right? But what I'm saying there is that after this transaction also we sort of are linked to them in some of the other capacity, right? So it could be a virtual CFO or something like that, right? The idea is to keep that ongoing engagement. So when I say transactional, it's very like if you go to one of these online providers today, right? It's a very fixed price point business, right? You pay this much, you get this. You come to us back, you don't come back, it doesn't make a difference to us, right?
Yeah.
Where we sort of want to be with people who we feel that can I make it an annual revenue business and not just one time, because the inherent cost which I spent on a lead is very high as compared, and we want to work on the whole LTV side of it. So that's our main thing, that we have a more long-term relationship than just a one-time thing.
And I guess the package has to be pretty much end to end, right? In the sense that, like, if you look at big strategy firms, like there you have strategy consultants, then you have operational consultants, you have, at this particular segment, I guess it has to be end to end, right? It has to be like a turnkey solution.
Absolutely. So I'll give you an example, right? So there's a company which we started, we literally started the company, we incorporated, did some trademark work and stuff like that. Then we did some accounting work for them. Then they sort of had an in-house guy. So we sort of migrated out from there. We kept taking care of their compliance and, other things. And they were raising money. So whatever diligence support. Then they had those things also in-house. Now they're going international. So we're assisting them with, how can they go about doing international. And we're sort of managing their promoter funds now. So the idea is that relationship kept evolving based on the size of the company. The company kept growing, and some of the functions they sort of kept bringing in house, and we understand that, right? Because the outsourcing of some things can work till a point, right? But then everything then eventually moves in house, and that's how it should be. So our idea is that the relationship should keep evolving. So we're done with one thing, we've set it. Let's move on to the next. Let's move on to the next, right? So today we're doing international. Tomorrow we might do something else, which might be new for them. So idea is that it gives us also new exposure, and then even for the company, what happens is that once it's set, then their in-house team can sort of take over that.
You talked about international as well. I'm curious, like SMEs and startups obviously have a different, when I say SMEs, like somewhat slightly ahead in terms of the maturity curve. But startups, one of the biggest things in addition to growing revenue is a lot of capital raising, right? What are some of the trends you're seeing? I mean, especially with the international capital flowing in, like, and people talk about Delaware flips, and people want to register in a Singapore and overseas territory. Is that something that you see a fair bit in the startup ecosystem?
So I think that's just going to increase. And again, people say that it's difficult to invest in India and stuff like that. Actually, it's not that difficult to invest in India, but as a mindset, right? Like for global investors, though there's this whole ease of doing business and stuff like that, but a lot of investors somewhere find it a little, are not very confident on the Indian judiciary system, for example, right? Or they're not very happy with the kind of IP protection that's given, right? Or probably the exit of funds. So because of which, and also the tax rates, right? So because of which a lot of these global investors are wanting to essentially invest in the Indian ecosystem at large,
right,
but they don't want the setups or the companies to be incorporated in India. So I don't see the problem in terms of the money flowing into India for the growth of the Indian business ecosystem. Where I think there will be further lag is in terms of people wanting to establish more and more companies in Singapore and Delaware. So today the kind of tax debates and the tax incentives today Singapore sort of offers, we're not even close to that, right? And just the ease of incorporating it and doing those things, right? It's phenomenal in Singapore. So I mean, there's no reason for someone not to really consider. And they're, most importantly, they're evolving as time is spent, they're changing, right? So come up with a great framework for VCs and stuff like that, where you can establish a certain kind of organization which VCs get a lot of rebate. So a lot of VCs are now thinking of establishing in Singapore because of those merits, right? So, as India, obviously, we've come a long way in terms of in the last 3-4 years where we're trying to do more and more things for the startup ecosystem. But I think still we have a long way in terms of doing more things.
I mean, it's interesting because like you are obviously looking at things the conversation that we are having when it comes to foreign money coming in, one is the demand side, right? And from the perspective of better tax regimes or better enforceability, but there's also a kind of a challenge from the supply side in the sense that if you have to look at scale foreign money, foreign credit, especially coming into India, and it has to kind of come through either the external commercial borrowing route or some sort of note issuance to FPIs. There are so many thresholds, and there is a lot of regulatory control on capital flows, as a result of which a lot of foreign investors, irrespective of like the big guys like a Blackstone or a Brookfield, who have India operations, who have Indian entities, a lot of the foreign investors also end up going through complicated structures in order to actually put money within the Indian ecosystem. Obviously, it's good news for guys like like you or me, but I mean, I'm just wondering, don't you think that's also, is that a theme that's worth playing out?
I think the way Indian regulators are shaping up, they're sort of trying to make things a little more easier and a little more transparent. So in fact, like the number of structures that are available, right, in terms of doing these things are reducing by the day. So I mean, if you spoke to me 5 years, 6 years back, right, there were ample of options in terms of structuring a deal and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But I don't see that really happening as much today. So people who really want to invest in India today as this thing, which I personally think India is it's going to be one of the centuries for India, right? We're going to be up the game, right? So I don't see people really looking at regulatory hurdles in terms of investing, because no one wants to miss the bus. So I know regulators come at a cost, right? But I think there's an overarching need for being on the bus, right? And no one wants to miss the bus in the India bus right now, is what I would like to believe at this point.
Sure, Jitesh is an optimist.
Yeah,
clearly.
Much like myself, so that's good.
And I'm the cynic here, so it's a good dynamic.
Coming to your business, Jitesh, you sort of, again, like Nikhil also asked you about it, but being focused on relationship versus a transactional driven, obviously it comes with its own structure of monetization and fee structure, right? You typically, I'm guessing, operate on a retainer kind of a model, but when the output is sort of slow moving and you see those changes and whether they're adding value, how do you put success metrics around it? And it's something that goes beyond just Treelife. I mean, we also think about it a lot. How do you quantify or evaluate your work which goes to the organization? I mean, yes, will they directly see a benefit in their bottom line? That's obviously one way, but when it's more qualitative and sort of some of these SMEs are big ships to turn. They take time to actually show the results, right? Like it becomes difficult to justify the value add. And how do you sort of think about that?
I think so. If I look at my business, right, and so I think today we're equally dependent on project-based revenues and retainers, right? So
Yeah.
Typically, as you rightly said, right, Sharad, that especially in the Indian ecosystem, right, advisory as a concept is not really seen.
Yeah.
Okay, so even our project, our recurring revenues are something which is very mundane in nature, right? So like an account revenue or legal revenue and stuff, which is very something which people need off the shelf, right? But if you ask me from a turnkey project where we're sort of enabling us this thing, right? We've seen that we basically take a very, very small retainer fee, right? But the maximum sort of attached to some kind of a cost driver or a revenue driver, and it's basically you're sort of taking like a punt, like it's investment banking, right? That you sort of spend your time, and if it works, make big money. Otherwise, it's sort of down the drain. So keeping, I think for us that sort of becomes a thought that where at any point what we look at is that our fixed costs, okay, like salaries, infra, at any point is being managed by a retainer revenue.
Sure.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's always a metric which I want to maintain irrespective. And For me, whatever project revenue comes, that's all my wealth. So get it, great. I mean, otherwise I should be able to sustain. So for me, that's always, like if I look at my initial days, right, we were so dependent on project level revenue because people didn't trust us, right, to, hand over and give that kind of revenue. But, as time passed, people sort of start seeing the credibility, and today we're probably more 50-50 sort of scenario. But, the idea would be that, you sort of have a 70% retainer revenue and sort of spend 30% on project because, project brings that volatility, right? So unless you've been in it for long and you've got that, corpus up your ass where, you know that this can sustain you even if you don't make a buck for it for a month, right? For a full year, you should have that. Then it's fine. Otherwise, it sort of can become a challenging thing. So, I mean, the idea is that you should have those many recurring mandates and that kind of a success rate for you to be able to just put yourself in a more project-driven, economy, if I had to put it. But I think just to conclude that point, that's a challenge I think that unanimously, is across the ecosystem where people in India especially don't understand advisory and strategy and this thing, right? We all think we know our business better than the other, right? We don't. I mean, like, today I might be better at finance, you might be better at marketing, the third person might be better at HR, right? But as humans, as Indians, we always think we're the best at everything. Only when shit hits the roof is when you want to, like, call people and say, okay, why don't you advise us and stuff like that.
Has anyone sort of, thrown in the idea of, especially when it comes to startups, who are, a lot of them are not fully capitalized yet, offering comp in form of equity? Is that, or equity-like structure? Is that something that you've seen thrown around, or seen in your experience, or something that you like?
So it's something I like. We've got a couple of places where we are working on that kind of a model.
Yeah.
But I think, in the future, at least personally, we would like to explore more such opportunities. So, I mean, if you look at today, our business, it's a very income generating asset, right? So today, I'll make, say, 5 lakh rupees for a year or whatever it is, right? And the next year I can make 6 lakhs or 8 lakhs or 10 lakh rupees, right? But if you ask me that when am I going to make a crore rupees, I might say that, it might take me like 5 years, 7 years, 10 years, right? So idea is with equity, right? It's like a lottery ticket, right? Where, you invest in probably 10 of such startups, and then, you pray that, 3 of them work, but, the 3 of them will act as your wealth builder. So they'll give you enough in terms of that. So, I mean, I think we're sort of over that. We're sort of moving more towards where, we've sort of saved money to sort of, come out of the little bit of the more income generation asset and go more towards the wealth generation side of things, so that, in the next 10 years, we are able to create a retirement corpus.
Yeah. And, it probably, it also is linked to the first line of decent exits, which a lot of investors in startups will await, right? First, when those 1 or 2 generations or waves of exits happen, obviously any kind of equity linked comp structure becomes a more stabilized part of the overall game. But I also wanted to, obviously we spoke a bit about SMEs, and now we're talking about startups. So within the startup ecosystem, like last 8 to 10 months, if I would have asked you what are the big themes that you're seeing in terms of what is being thrown your way as Treelife, and what you are in general observing, as a market participant. Obviously, lots of acquisitions are going on. Consolidation is happening in a few sectors. Fundraising is happening in things like edtech, specifically, which is COVID linked. Then you also see regulatory themes like startups now being given permission to list directly outside India. What are you seeing personally, in terms of the kind of problems which are thrown your way from startups?
So I think sort of giving that, currently, if I look at it, right, I think people are overall very positive about the ecosystem at large, right? And both from a demand and supply, right? So when I look at it from a supply of capital perspective, right, this pandemic, people have, sat back and realized, a lot of people I think have, who've been stuck in their regular life, they've realized that they have a lot of capital to sit on, and, everyone's looking for alternative asset classes, right? And startup has actually, turned out to be one of the, for a very crude word, sexy asset class, right? Where everyone wants to be called an angel investor, evangelist, and hustler, and these things, right? So at least I think there are more and more people who have been forthcoming in terms of, please send us opportunities where we can sort of invest our money, right? Because, we were so busy in our general lives that we never thought of it. But, we're bored with, having fixed deposits, mutual funds, equities and stuff. We want to look at other asset classes. So I think from a supply perspective, obviously it's, especially in the angel side, we're seeing growth. On the VC side, people are more and more excited, I think. But what's happened is that VCs have started looking at two, three more important metrics. First, as long as you had a good product, people they were happy to fund you, right? But I think now people are looking at more things around, are you a seasoned, a veteran, right? So if you've been into the business for the last 7-10 years, right, it's a great value add. Second is, do you understand, acquisition cost, long lifetime value of customers? They're looking for more unit economic driven businesses than, just something which could become a big community at large. Yeah. So I think from that perspective, investors also looking at, investing money. I don't see that as a challenge. In terms of, startups, going all the way, right? So I think the way they're so frugal and they have that adaptability to change and stuff like that. I think we're seeing that startups are basically being able to cater to the the environment today, right? So if you did have sort of startups right now, right, just when the pandemic hit us, right, it would have been very difficult for bigger organizations to evolve into something which hit us overnight, right? But because of the new age business, we are able to sort of have everything, right? Doorstep delivery, this, that, everything being able on the run, right? So I think from that perspective, people are now finding it very are dependent on a lot of services, right? So like a Swiggy, Uber, and all these things. There's a big high dependability which has come on startup, which didn't exist probably, till 3-4 years back. And just to finish that thread, I think I'm not very bullish on a particular sector that, okay, it's tech, health tech. I think for me, when I look at a business, I'm trying to see that is it a demand generating business that, if it's something which is, looking to further create demand, or a supply aggregation business, right? Because so typically when you're trying to create a demand, right, a new product and stuff like that, right, the cost is extremely high to acquire a customer. But typically where you're just, where there's already a demand, right? So something like an Uber, what it did, right? There were people who were already looking at, cabs. What they did is they aggregated the supply, right? So what your cost is primarily spent is towards, aggregation of that supply, and then obviously the demand flows in. So I think my increasing sentiment is towards the latter, where I feel Indian customers don't have loyalty, right? Where so it's no point spending too much money on acquiring the customer, where if you can just sort of aggregate the demand at large and supply, I think you should just focus on that rather than creating new demand at say coding and stuff like that. Don't go ahead and create free more demand. Look at places where you have an existing demand.
Yeah, a few months back, we had a VC partner come onto our podcast channel, and he was talking about the toothbrush test as his sort of way to look at a company. And he was talking about, how you have to go to the toothbrush every morning. So there is a demo, like that's not going to be taken away. And he was sort of coming from a very demand centric thought process as well. If we were to sort of ask you high level, next 5-10 years, where do you see, India's startup ecosystem sort of evolve? And you have a very positive take anyway, which is good. But where would you like to sort of, put your money, if you will? Obviously, it's changing, and especially with COVID in place, like you alluded to, a lot of cost cutting and measures being taken and implemented. Anything that jumps out, something that a sector which you think like we can all get behind.
So I personally, look at a lot of FMCG. Right, I think this whole direct to consumer thing is going to blow up, and where people will subscribe to things directly, like for example, refills. Right, I think refills is a big thing to where there is this big thing where people don't want to use plastics and stuff like that. Where today when a refill comes in a plastic bag, right? So where you'll find people having something where they could just like plug and play, refill it, and coming out, right? So I think things around FMCG where again it's the demand is already set, right? Like how do you really aggregate the supply, right? So I'm bullish in those kind of businesses, right? Again, health tech. I mean, there's a lot which is happening in health tech, right? But Personally, I mean, I don't think I've not seen like a big player really emerge out and say that okay, today how you have a Swiggy dominating the space or a Flipkart dominating the space. I still feel in health. I mean, you obviously have a Practo and Purefit, but no one is right now like a domain leader where I can say okay, that this guy it is right who's giving pin to piano health, right? So I think I'm still a little bullish there that we'll have a big health tech player who will really emerge and capture the market. I think for me, these two spaces would be something which I would really look at in the future. And if you ask me the next 5 to 10 years, I mean, I'm guessing people, I mean, I'm just seeing it grow. Like, we are, I mean, for me, the next 8 to 10 years is again a big wave, right? Where you'll find a lot of people. I think so. It's also because of the mindset our generation follows, right? Where we all feel we're not cut out for jobs, right? Where we feel that we're made for bigger things, and it's not a very it's not like today your purpose is not just making money, right? There's a bigger purpose where you want to add value, right? We as a generation, it's a lot about value drivers, and that's one of the key reasons when we are in a relationship business, right? Because I want to be at the end able to value a client, right, or add value to the client. And that's the generation thesis, right, where everyone's working. And it's very rare that you're in a job and you feel that you're adding value. It's only when you get out of it and you feel that okay, even if I'm doing something which is paying me half, but I've given some advice to that person and he's been able to use it and add some value. I'm able to add some value to his life. I think that's the key metric for us as people and not just the money. And so for me, I'm going to see, I feel that we'll see a lot more entrepreneurs coming our way and trying their hands in different things.
Well, like you are saying, adding value. My father says being confused. I don't know what to, I mean, I'm just kidding. No, this is obviously, I thought I'll wear my cynical cap again, just to kind of add some, add a counter in the conversation. But is the, like you mentioned FMCG and you mentioned health. There's a kind of building narrative in the country that we are kind of slowly moving towards oligopolistic kind of a setup. There'll be like few big guys. Like me and Sharad always have a Reliance related joke in every podcast that we do, but we keep on hearing India is now a double A rated country, Adani, Ambani, whatever you might want to call. But I mean there's that, even within FMCG itself, there is that, because there is that kind of scale aggregation play. One sees that bigger established players are slowly kind of, there's a risk that innovation would get challenged as a result, because when it comes to access of foreign capital, slowly the government is moving, or the regulator is moving in such a way that I mean, foreign businesses have now are now moving away from operating directly in India, but they are kind of collaborating with an Indian partner. That's how regulatory environment is changing at a very higher level, which actually obviously entrenches local big guys. Do you see that as a risk uh, in the sectors that you are bullish on? Or I know this is like a more, this is completely unrelated from our from the rest of the podcast, but just because we were kind of having that thread, that's why I thought
No, no, absolutely, that's fine. No, so I think when I talk startups, I think my idea is innovation, right? Like forced to innovate, right? So I think even if you look at FMCG, right, and today you will have say an HUL, right, which would have all the the economies of scale, access to capital, and everything, right? And I'm okay with that, right? But my idea is that the D2C guys coming into the space will sort of compel an HUL also to evolve the FMCG space. So what I'm bullish is on the innovation that will come in the whole FMCG space than a particular player. So I'm saying that probably 10 years later also you might have an Hindustan Unilever, I mean just the Unilever essentially leading the space, right, which is fine. But I think the innovation what we see in the space at large is going to be phenomenal.
Right, right. And any in terms of like just the sheer structure by which startups raise capital. I mean, there are lots of innovations that we kind of see in the Western world. Be it structured equity. Looking at debt with warrants, converts,
even ICOs.
ICOs. Do you see any of those trends picking up here? And there's obviously the
No,
narrative of Indian companies being allowed to now list overseas. There's a lot of news coming that way. But I mean, like from your vantage point, do you see any traction? Do you actually see companies or founders who are planning their overall strategy taking that you know possibility into mind, or are we still a bit early in that journey?
no, I think so. That's very. I'm personally, I feel that we are very behind in the whole regulatory ecosystem. That's right. So, I mean, so all these things, listing abroad and stuff like that, right? Let's probably point one of the startups which can really do it. But if you look at the startup mass market, right, today, say if they want to raise a capital of a few lakh rupees, right, it's a nightmare, right? The kind of clients you have or the cost which you have, right? So for example, in US, right, you have this thing called the safe notes,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
It's basically promoted by Y Combinator, and it's a very standard practice, right? You literally download the template, change the name, then the money can be wired in your account the next day, right? No headache at all, right? But in India today, I think it takes us ourselves like so much time to understand, okay, that this is the right structure for this. The company, if it's raising X amount of money, they'll spend like a percentage of that and just compliance and legal costs and stuff like that. And we ourselves feel bad about it, that why are you raising money, as a matter of fact, but
Yeah.
their business to raise the capital and it's important for them. But at our end, I mean, we are also helpless because we have to do the compliance. So I think that's something which I mean, we've been personally trying to work on this, trying to make representations around this, where the idea is that we really need to probably evolve this, make bring in easier instruments where smaller companies can just sort of take investments without any like hoo-ha and stuff like that, and just get the money overnight. I think that'll make life easy for everyone.
And Jitesh, like in terms of
Jitesh, I think, got slightly cynical talking to us by the end.
So this is one topic I'm very cynical about in general. Like I'm very
Finally,
in the class,
finally,
I was speaking to someone in the government. I was like, no, this is something which we really need to do, and I've been like very insistent about this.
where do you see Treelife sort of, a near-term future? It's sort of add on more clients and go deeper into the relationships. Is that sort of the natural growth trajectory that you see over the next few years?
Absolutely, I think so. That's going to be one part of what we're going to be doing. But I think our idea will sort of become more around even as thought leaders of the ecosystem, right? So in the next
Got it.
5 years, our idea is to create that presence about being thought leaders, where whatever cynical about, we are being able to do it in a more circled forum where it could sort of have that impact, right? I mean, so again, as an organization, obviously. Revenue is the key factor, but the underlying principle is to add value and not add value to a single on a one-to-one level, but can we make it one-to-many? And that's the objective which we want to follow as an organization. Like if you're able to become thought leaders and stuff like that, I think there's no better way to be able to do it.
No, I mean, I think that's a good mission to have, and obviously, with you having spent years into building a business from scratch, it's a good way to kind of take things forward in terms of actually transforming your cynicism into some actionable
Absolutely
points. And no, I think this was a lot of fun, Jitesh. I hope you also enjoyed this conversation, and I definitely did.
Yeah, no, it was good luck on Treelife, and thanks for swinging by. It was a fun chat.
Oh, it was a pleasure talking to you guys. Yeah.
Great.
Thanks for having me over.
Oh no, absolutely, our pleasure. So yeah, with that, we'll be back soon. Probably in let's not put a time frame.
Yeah.
We are never right in that in terms of when we are going to come back, but hopefully soon. Yeah.
Yeah.
And with that, I think thanks a lot, Jitesh. This is Nikhil Arora.
This is Sharat Tupran
signing off.